Howdy folks, Justin here, and welcome to another episode of Color Theory with Celine, where we teach my cat about the different colors in Elder Scrolls Legends and, a little bit of information about the mechanics they share, decks that have been popular with those, and the race that color represents in the Elder Scrolls lore. You'll have to excuse my voice. I am really under the weather today. I've been sick for a few days now, but the show must go on, right? So here we are. And I want to apologize, too, for not doing a new episode of this for a while. Um, I needed to take a break from some of the scheduled stuff to make room in my own personal life for things that I had going on. But things are, I'm still really busy, but things are more ordered now. So things are easier to work with and around, which gives me time to start doing this again. I'm not quite sure what day of the week this will be coming out on regularly because we do have Sundays now with Sandra drafting videos. So I will figure that out, but this should be coming out sometime in the next few days. So I hope you are all as excited as I am to be delving into the orcs. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. Warrior, of course, is the name of this class in this color combination, but orcs are near and dear to my heart. But yeah, we are going to start talking about how all this works. So, uh, I made a special orc deck list so I could more easily highlight what's going on in these colors. Um, the first thing I like to do in these videos is tell you what you get, what legendaries you can look forward to as rewards at levels 24 and 32 for your level up rewards if you have an orc as your avatar. In the warrior case, it's really straightforward. It's two cards. It's either Gortwog Gronagram, who I have a little bit of information here I'm going to share with you. Um, Gortwog, it was a king of the Third Orsinium, leader of the Orcs during the late Third Era. He worked hard to make sure that his people were accepted by the Empire. He did not like necromancy. He preferred to summon his friends directly from his deck to the playboard. And he appears in the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, and then is mentioned as a historical figure in all subsequent Elder Scrolls games, which I thought was kind of cool. One of the things I love about Legends is that they pull characters from the very extensive Elder Scrolls continuity from all of the eras and all of the games, which I think is really neat. And the orcs are definitely one of the more interesting races. I think the less human they are in general, the more interested I am in them. Um, Personally, I'm a huge fan of the Khajiit, the Argonians, and the orcs. But yeah, Gortwog Gronagram, big orc in history, important dude, and one of the two cards you can get with your legendary reward that you get leveling up when you hit level 24 or 32 with an orc avatar. I'm going to go ahead and move my pretty face down here for right now. I really want to get this as small as possible today since even my hair is sick. The other card that you can get, the other legendary card, is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful cards in the game. Sees almost no play, but I think this is one of the most powerful cards in the game. That card is Woodorc Headhunter. Consider how almost every deck that runs green runs Cliff Racer, right? The 4/4 with charge for 5. Orc Headhunter is superior in every way except for the small fact that he doesn't have charge unless you control another orc. Um, Honestly, to have access to a card at this power level, that's kind of a small stipulation in my opinion. I think that it will only take a few more orcs that can run sort of utility positions in a control or mid-range deck that isn't necessarily orc tribal before Woodorc Headhunter becomes a must include in decks that you wouldn't say, oh, this is my orc deck. Because Woodorc Headhunter is an absolute beast of a card. It can function as removal. It can function as reach for lethal. It's just exceptionally powerful. 5/4 charge breakthrough for 5 is, if it wasn't conditional on the charge, would be the best 5-drop in my opinion in the game. Even next to Markarth Bannerman, who is an incredibly powerful card. Markarth Bannerman has to live for a turn. Woodorc Headhunter does not. So, Woodorc Headhunter is the other card you can get as a legendary reward with an Orc Avatar, and yeah, I've really been overwhelmed actually by the power level of this card when I started playing Orcs. I actually am kind of a late comer to Orcs. I didn't start playing Orcs till like December maybe. But Woodorc Headhunter is the card that really, really makes you happier playing Orcs. At least one of them. Um, so I think that I haven't done this before in these videos, but I wanted to talk about prophecy cards in these colors. In particular, I'm going to emphasize prophecy cards you actually need to worry about seeing. So we're going to start with purple because there's actually kind of an asterisk next to this explanation for red. But in willpower, the cards actually see any play, any consistent play that you should look out for playing around, are basically just Midnight Sweep and Mummify. Midnight Sweep is seeing more and more play in decks that are kind of uh, getting hip to the fact that running a ton of prophecy cards in your deck increases your win rate. And Midnight Sweep is seeing play now in scout decks that weren't previously running it. I've seen it in sorcerer decks that are looking to gain some tempo by triggering prophecies. So Midnight Sweep is definitely one you need to be on the lookout for when you're playing um, against a warrior deck. The best way, in my opinion, to play around Midnight Sweep, if you suspect or know your opponent is running it, would be to watch my video about playing around prophecies. No, I'm just kidding. Although that video does exist if you want to go find it. It's Loser to Legends episode 2.5. But no, I think the best way to play around Midnight Sweep, if you suspect your opponent's running it, involves keeping a creature with at least 3 toughness behind as one of your last attackers, even if it doesn't make the most sense for rune break purposes, so that you can guaranteed clear the token off your next turn with that turn during your attack. And also, if you have a breakthrough creature, keeping that in mind as a way to continue pushing damage while also removing the token. And finally, making sure that you're swinging like every other, like a guy in the right lane, a guy in the left lane, a guy in the right lane, a guy in the left lane, so that you can clear both tokens out if possible, just to minimize the potential crackback aspect that your opponent might be thinking, oh, I'm a surprise kill my opponent with the RNG sunglasses on and everything. Playing around Midnight Sweep, that's how I would do it. Finally, Mummify is actually not really a card you can play around if you're unless you're only trying to go for lethal that turn. It's worth pointing out if your creature gets mummified, it no longer gets to attack. It counts as the first turn it entered play, so it's as summoning sickness, if you will. So Mummify is a card that yeah, if your objective is lethal and you suspect your opponent's running Mummify, I would hit them with your biggest creature first. Also, while also taking into consideration the number of runes you're breaking and stuff like that. Mummify is a pretty interesting card too because just like with various silence effects, in particular, I noticed this with Shadowfen Priest. More and more, it's being used not as a control or reactive tool, but more to just remove guard creatures. So if you are in a difficult to defend position but defensible, I would avoid breaking runes if you suspect your opponent of running Mummify to minimize the chances of them getting a free silence effect on your guard creature. Finally, Fire and Defender sees play in Orc lists and is actually, I think a pretty good card. A 1/4 guard with Prophecy for 2, I think is really good rate. I would definitely encourage every Orc deck to run 3 of these guys. And I don't think it's good necessarily in anything else, but I don't think it's bad either. And in a really aggressive metagame, it's a big enough body that I think it could do some serious work slowing your opponent down. Uh, Quick shout out now to Frostbite Spider. I actually think that if you're looking to run prophecy cards as a tempo play, i.e., a sorcerer deck who runs Midnight Sweep, I think Frostbite Spider is maybe more where you want to be, because it functions as Mummify does in the cases where you want to remove a guard creature with it, and it also swings for 3 if it's unopposed on the board. You do get 4 power on here, but I just really like the idea of a prophecy card with lethal. I think Frostbite Spider is underplayed. I don't think it's a great card necessarily, but I think it's underplayed considering I don't see it played at all. So the asterisk explanation for the prophecy cards in red is that all of these see play. Even cards like Grotwood Ambusher, which I don't personally believe are any good, these cards all see play because red is part of the Battle Mage prophecy deck package, and these cards all also see play in sort of up-and-coming archer aggro lists that are also looking to inch out every bit of value from prophecies as possible. So basically, you need to be familiar with all these prophecy cards if you're playing against an archer or a battle mage deck, because it's very likely that, or very possible anyway, that they're running all of these in an effort to win the game faster if you ever decide to attack and break a rune. Morkel Gatekeeper is a great card. Greystone Ravager, I think, is pretty mediocre. Very aggressive, very weak. Good at what it does. Sharpshooter Scout, I think, is a pretty weak card. The only time I've ever been impressed with Sharpshooter Scout was in Maricon's Crusader Altar deck, where because I have to admit I tried building a Crusader Altar deck, and finding a one drop that I didn't mind sacrificing is a real challenge in those colors. Sharpshooter Scout, I think, is the best option in that package. So there is that. Grotwood Ambusher, again, I think is a pretty bad card. Cast Out. If you're playing a deck that can win by removing a couple guard creatures in a row, Cast Out works for you. I'm uncomfortable with a tempo play that strong being in a deck whose creatures are that aggressive, if that makes sense. But that's a note for another time. Cast Out, obviously, kind of the sort of thing that you want to play around the same way you would play around Mummify, by simply not breaking any of your opponent's runes when you're attacking. So there's the prophecy cards for the warrior color combination that I thought were worth mentioning. Next, I wanted to talk about strengths and weaknesses of the colors. The strengths are, I'll go ahead and tie into the themes of the colors. Now, unlike most themes, like in the episode where we talked about Crusader, about yellow-red, the Nords, which is the race that overlaps between the two colors, have a theme of breaking your opponent's runes, and then they did all sorts of interesting things with that. That reflected the differences between the two colors, as well as just a general encouragement of it continuing to attack and break runes. Orcs are a little different in that the theme there is orcs, on the type line, right there, and then each of them does separate things that are related to their color, but not necessarily related to orcs in general. Orcs kind of have any of the abilities that a lot of the abilities that both the two colors have. So if we want to go ahead and real quickly look at all orcs, we do have a couple creatures with charge. We have Battle Rage Orc, and we have Wood Orc Headhunter. We have a couple cards that give bonuses to other creatures' power, which is sort of just a red ability in general, as charges. We have cards that give orcs breakthrough, and we have cards with breakthrough. This isn't an orc, but we have cards with breakthrough, like the Orc Clan Shaman, the Wood Orc Headhunter. And here I guess we have another card that gives a bonus to its power. The only one I can think of actually like this in purple besides this is Gloomwraith. So maybe this is a unique orc mechanic to a degree. We have a Tribal Lord and Hrothgar Kingpin. We have a Toughness boost, which is definitely an endurance ability. We have a +1/+1. A quick note, by the way, I think Hrothgar Artisan is criminally underplayed. I think it's a really strong, really flexible card. I think it's one of the best cards you can take in Arena, and I think that it wouldn't... If it wasn't for Young Mammoth, I think Hrothgar Artisan would see a lot of play, actually, in Constructed. But it is mostly outclassed all the time by Young Mammoth. But I still think that I like this card because it rewards people for thinking on their feet and making small incremental decisions that can win you the game, long term. But then we just have 4 or 5 bodies, which is sort of a purple thing. We have the dual color one, which is another orcs get +1/+1 and draw a random orc for your discard pile, which is a purple ability. So the orc mechanic is really kind of spread throughout things the colors do already, and then on top of that, it is just the byline, the orc. So as far as mechanics these two colors share, they share fewer mechanics, I think, in general than most of the other color combinations do, but they make up for it in a strong tribal theme, which I hope will get fleshed out more as time goes on. Other things that the two colors have in common, as far as strengths go, the most noteworthy one, in my opinion, is the ability to silence things. This effect is pretty much exclusive to Warrior, to red and purple. In red, it shows up in more aggressive creatures and equipment like Bone Bow and Earthbone Spinner. Earthbone Spinner, by the way, an excellent way to kill off Breton Conjurer. And in purple, we have 3 cards. We have Suppress, we have Cursed Spectre, and we have Shadowfen Priest. Of all of the colors, of all of the color combinations, the Warrior deck is the one that you're going to want to be most careful around playing around Silence. Because at the very least, you can probably expect them to be running 3 Shadowfen Priests and 3 Earthbone Spinners, unless it's just Orcs, in which case you might just see the Earthbone Spinners, but you're still going to see some silence effects in this color combination. Finally, there's not as much of this. I'll start over here. Support removal is found in these two colors, and it's the only place you're going to find it on creatures. You find it on Shadowfen Priest, just a really versatile, powerful card, and in red, in strength, you find it on Belligerent Giant, which at 7/4 for a 7/4 that destroys a support card, that's a really powerful, hard to come back from play. I mean, even just bouncing a guard creature can be a huge tempo swing, so it's worth keeping in mind what that card does. I want to point out too, other strengths go, as far as strengths go, both of these colors are home to some enormous guard creatures. In red, I mean, you have Prophecy Guard. You also have Prophecy Guard creatures in most colors, but you have Prophecy Guard. But the ones I'm really thinking about are Dremora Marcanes, which is, if you want it to be, um, well, it approaches infinite levels of power, when you consider what you could do with it. But it's a huge guard creature. Vigilant Giant, one of the most efficient stat-wise cards in the game at 8/8 for 8 with guard, breakthrough, and draw a card. And then in purple, of course, you have a lot more of these, but you have Nahag Leave, you have Iron Atronach, you have Mountain Tyrant even, and the much more played Preserver of the Root. So there are some enormous guard creatures in both of these colors, which are worth keeping in mind if you were ever to pursue a more controlling strategy in these colors. Finally, as far as the things the two colors have in common, there are some weaknesses in this color combination. I think part of the reason we've never seen a lot of really effective control decks in this color, or at least really popular control decks in this color combination, is because of a lack of single target removal and a lack of AoE removal. There are options, right? There is Mummify, sort of as a lone single target quasi-answer. But there's not really a lot. There are a lot of silence effects, but the flip side of that is there's no piercing javelin, there's no lightning bolt, right? Every other color combination is likely to have access to some answers that this one doesn't have. There's no finish off, leaf lurker. What you do have instead, though, which is kind of interesting, and this is going to segue into the next part of the discussion where I talk about decks that have seen play in this color combination. I want to first hop onto the Doomcrag Vampire Tokens and Ping deck. This is actually something I talked about a couple weeks ago, and then a couple days later, somebody was like, "Oh, I hit Legend with this." I'm sure that there's no connection between me saying it, but it was really cool to see two references to this idea in the same week because I think it's worth looking at. Doomcrag Vampire, I'm going to go put it over here so my face isn't over it, gives all other friendly creatures in that lane lethal, right? Which is reasonable as it is. I mean, a 4/4 lethal for 6 kind of subpar. But when you combine it with cards like Nord Firebrand, Sharpshooter Scout, a whole lot of creatures like that in this color combination, any charge creatures, what you suddenly, Stone Shard Orc, Valenwood Huntsman, Skaven Pyromancer, what you have is suddenly incredibly effective single target or AoE removal even. Because the only other AoE removal effect you even have in these colors, besides Fireball, which almost doesn't count, is Burn and Pillage, which, while definitely a card that you would play in, like, say, an Orcs deck, is not a card that you would really run in a control package. So I think that the Doomcrag Vampire Tokens Ping type deck is something to keep an eye out for. I mean, it might even be a place where you play Grotwood Ambusher. Because it's unique. I think it's really hard to play around also. And it's something that not a lot of people are going to see coming. The next one I want to talk about is the Hrothgar Ramp Prophecy deck. I don't see as much of this as I did for a few months. It's kind of fallen out of favor. But the printing of Histgrove kind of opened up ramp options to other color combinations. So, you run Histgrove, you run Treeminder, and then you run the Scout Guard package with stuff like Preserver of the Root, stuff like Shadowfen Priest, Night Shadow, Nahag Leave, and in addition to that, you run a host of prophecy creatures to help get you triggers off of Hrothgar Forge. Hrothgar Forge is kind of an RNG fest where you the first time you summon a creature, each turn you slap a random equipment on it. Having a Hrothgar Forge out in the long game can win you the game against control because, or even in like a mid-range ramp mirror, because you're just generating more value per card than they are effectively gaining at least 2 cards worth of value every time you play a creature. I saw quite a bit of this a few months back. I thought it was pretty interesting. I haven't seen a lot of it lately, but it's definitely something worth looking at. I don't know if it's particularly well positioned against the value sorcerer deck right now, so that might be why it's fallen out of favor so much. As far as decks sort of like warping, or not warping necessarily, but defining the meta, I think that you have the sorcerer deck, the value sorcerer deck, and you've got as a finisher Supreme Atromancer, and both of these things I think are probably difficult for that deck to handle for very well, and might just be a bad position for the deck at the moment. But things change, and this is definitely one that's on my radar for fun, kind of interesting things to do. Yeah, so that is something to keep in mind. Real quick, I got to give a shout out to my favorite 2-card combo in the game, which is Daedric Dagger, lethal and +1/+1, and Whirling Duelist. This works exactly like you might hope it does, where every time if you put a Daedric Dagger on this thing, it's going to kill all the opposing creatures in the lane, and then every time you put an additional equipment on it, it's going to do the same thing. This is like Staff of Sparks plus lethal creature. This is something to keep in mind, and something that might find its way into the Doomcrag Vampire deck as sort of a redundancy for that effect. Finally, I think that there's a deck we all know I'm going to talk about, and that is the Orc Deck. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my Warrior Orc decks. I know that Orcs see play sometimes in Archer, and I know that Orcs sometimes see play in Crusader, but I am a huge fan of the Warrior Orc deck. I shoved as many Orcs into this deck as possible. The only things in this deck that aren't Orcs are the Rapid Shots, the Withered Hand Cultists, the Earthbone Spinners, and the Dragons. It's great. It's kind of a linear strategy. There aren't a lot of like skill testing cards, if you know what I mean, in this deck. It's more of a matter of hoping to curve out, and if not, because this is definitely on the slower end of an aggro deck, making a decision each turn whether it's more important to clear off my opposing creatures, because a lot of these creatures are very valuable for the stats and can frequently 2 for 1. Or is it more important to push damage and just try to kill my opponent? The deck lacks a lot of reach. It's really only got it in the form of Battle Rage Orc and Wood Orc Headhunter. So a lot of the times it is correct to make a more calculated trade than it is to just swing and attack. But I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's a good starter. It would be a good starter deck if there weren't so many legendaries in it. I think there's 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, just 7 legendaries looks like. So no, it's not terrible. I think it's a deck that's worth giving a shot to. You can then, with Gorwog, even get an achievement if you manage to summon 30 orcs with them. I'm working on it. I think I have 20 out of 30 so far. And you can get a title, which is pretty cool. So there's definitely that to consider. But I think Orcs is a pretty cool deck. I think it won't take... I mean, here's the thing. If an Orc was printed with a silence effect on it, I'd be pretty happy. If a purple Orc was printed with Last Gasp, draw a card, I'd be pretty happy. Which is actually... we're going to go with my... usually when I talk about cards in these color combinations, I talk about stuff that I think is interesting, not sort of like Fantasyland cards I want to see played. But in this case, I got a Fantasyland card I want to see played. For Magicka, right? For a 2/2 Orc, summon, silence a creature, Last Gasp, draw a card. I know this is... It doesn't obsolete anything, right? Because Earthbone Spinner, more attack, and can ping afterwards. The 4-cost silence effect here, Cursed Spectre, has Prophecy, right? But I feel like this card would be a lot of fun to play. It would see play in Orc decks, and I believe it would see play outside of Orc decks. I understand there's a limit to how many silence effects you can run to still have the game be fun. I get that. But that's the card I want to see in these colors. I end each one of these videos by talking about a card I'd love to see that fits the color effects. I don't think this pushes anything new. It's definitely explored territory, except for the Last Gasp, draw a card. But I think Last Gasp, draw a card is an effect I definitely want to see played. I think you could put it in purple without any breaking of anything. I want to see an Orc with Silence, and I just think it'd be a fun card. So that's my thought for that. And that is this episode of Color Theory with Celine. I hope you guys had a great time watching. It felt good to get back into doing these, so I look forward to doing more of them, and I'll figure out a schedule for when these will be coming out in the future. Until then, I will see you all on the ladder, and hopefully we're playing orcs.